You are about to enter the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on shockwaveskullsessions.com. And now your host, Bob Nalbandian.
Shockwave Skull Sessions. We got another spectacular episode with a legendary artist. We're going to go through the entire catalog of Angel with the one and only Angel vocalist Frank DiMino. How you doing there, Frank?
Right. Well, it's nice to be here, guys. I'm so glad you asked me to join in this chat.
Absolutely, and we got our Shockwave Skull Sessions regular. You know you are now considered a regular Monte Conner, whether you like it or not.
I certainly will never turn down an opportunity to get on the phone and go through the catalog of one of my favorite artists. And as I always say, if the 13-year-old me would have been told, hey, one day you're going to be on the phone with Frank DiMino talking about, going album by album, I wouldn't have believed it. So,
well, thank you.
This is pretty amazing.
It is. These are a lot of fun. And of course, a couple weeks ago, Monty and I did a great podcast with Joe Bouchard from Blue Oyster Cult, along with Andy Leff.
Those guys, yeah.
That's right. You guys did. You guys kind of similar in a way. And our third guest, we cannot forget Mr. Don Jamieson. I believe the second or third time we've had you on a Skull Sessions, Don. How you doing, man?
Well, just like anybody, I'm hanging in there, and music is helping me through it. So obviously, since we started discussing having Frank on, I've been going through all my vinyl again and listening to all the great stuff that Frank and the boys have put together. So excited to hear all the stories and what went into the making of this great band.
And real quick, Don, why don't you? I know obviously with the lockdown, you've had to cancel a lot of comedy appearances. What do you have going on now? Are you doing any kind of online things? And there was something I read about that metal show is back on or online on VH1. You want to give the listeners a little update on what's going on with you?
Yeah, I guess VH1 released some of the old episodes of that metal show on their website, so people can go there and take a trip down memory lane, which is great because the only season was the last one that was available. So they can go back and they can see there was one season of that metal show, which I called my Angel season. I think it was season 8, where it was just every week I talked about Angel. I made a point of it. So hopefully you can find
and I
that.
appreciate that, Don.
Yeah, man. Well, we were all, especially Eddie and I, huge Angel fans, and it's been great, especially because over the last few years you've been active, and so guys like me and Eddie and Bob and Monty, we started talking about the band again, and it was great. This is a band you don't want to forget the legacy of.
Hey Frank, if you don't mind, how much did Don charge you for that promo? So Monty, we never kind of talked about what you're doing at Nuclear Blast. Give a quick update for people that don't know.
I'm still doing the same thing I've been doing here since 2012, just signing all the cutting edge modern metal of the day. And things have been great here. We haven't had to lay anyone off or furlough anyone during these times. The company's still healthy. We're still actively signing bands. So I think we're faring a little better than most companies. It helps that we're owned by a really huge digital distributor called Believe Digital. And, Believe very much is all about streaming and digital, which, of course, has suffered much less in this environment than physical sales have. So I think we're in a better position than most labels.
All right. Great to hear. And Frank, really quickly, I know you've been living in Vegas for a while. Why don't you give a quick update on what's going on with you?
Yeah, well, I'm still teaching. And, Danny, Punky, and I are still in contact with each other all the time and kind of trying to still write while we're in three different places, which is kind of difficult, but we kind of learned how to do it from doing the last album. All the other albums, Punky and Greg and myself usually were together and writing together. So it was a little bit different from the doing the last album the way we did, but it worked out okay. We were able to work out all the problems with it, and so we continue to do that now.
And we'll get to that album at the end. We're going to, of course, go through the entire catalog, starting from the debut Angel in 1975 and working our way up through, I guess, Live Without a Net, and then we'll talk about some of the latter albums you did with Punky. But before we get into the debut, there's a lot of controversy about where Angel was from. A lot of people considered Angel an LA-based band, but you're actually originally based in Washington, D.C., did a lot of shows out there and in New York. I know Gene Simmons discovered you. And then was it just before the first album you guys moved to L.A.?
Yes.
Okay.
What happened was we had all been in different bands playing that circuit in D.C. down in Georgetown. And it was, God, I can't think of his name. He was a writer for Rolling Stone and Circus. And he used to come down to see us at Bogies. Bogies was a new club that was opening in D.C. All of us had played at different clubs, and we were of course, in different bands with, Barry was in the Cherry People after Punky was in the Cherry People. Barry and I were in a band called Max, and Mickey, Barry, and I were in a band called Max. And now we had all played around in that in that whole circuit there. When we put Angel together, we knew all the club owners. So the owner of Bogies asked us if we would debut the band there. And he allowed us to rehearse upstairs. So we rehearsed until we were ready and wrote some songs up there. The first few songs that we wrote were upstairs there. And when we were ready, we brought it down. And Gordon Fletcher was the writer, and he did a lot of reviews for Rolling Stone and Circus. And he's the one that brought the guys from Kiss down to Bogies.
And wasn't Punky in that band Bucks before
Yes.
Angel? Yes.
Yeah, Bucks. But Bucks never really played around DC, I don't believe, at that time. I think because Ralph and what's the name of the guitar player were East Coast. I knew Ralph from Boston. Ralph and I knew each other from the early days in Boston. And I think they were kind of like back and forth kind of thing. But the other bands that we had together were always in that D.C. area.
And that, of course, was the great Ralph Moorman, who was also played with Joe Perry Project and
Right.
Savoy Brown. I know Monte was a big fan of him.
Yeah, Ralph was a great singer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, Angel famously covered the Bucks song "White Lightning" on "On Earth as It Is in Heaven."
Yeah, I guess it took us 3 albums to get to it. We used to play it live all the time, but we figured it wasn't really an Angel song until we finally said, listen, we played it live enough times, let's just record it.
Well, it's so funny, the connection to Joe Perry with Ralph Moorman also kind of brings an Aerosmith connection in, because I always view, when I listen to Angel's version of White Lightning, it always sounds to me like the best song that Aerosmith never wrote. I could completely hear Steven Tyler singing that song, the whole funky groove of it. It sounds like an Aerosmith song to me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of comes full circle with Joe Perry being connected to Ralph Moorman.
Yeah, we added that little funky guitar part that Punky overdubbed in there. That kind of gives it that kind of like chunky funky thing. Amazing cover. I love the original and the Angel version both. It's kind of hard to pick my favorite version. They're both pretty amazing. Yeah.
I was going to say, go ahead, Don.
Sorry, I just wanted to jump in because Frank mentioned about rehearsing and writing songs upstairs at Bogies.
Yeah.
Did any of those songs end up being on the first album?
Yeah, The Tower was the first one that we kind of like banged out. When we first got together, it was one of those things, and I've read this a couple of times. I read, that Jimmy Page was talking about this when they put Led Zeppelin together. But there is something really weird that happens when you play with certain people. And the first time the 5 of us really got together, started playing and just jamming out stuff, I think between all of us, we kind of looked at each other and went, there's something going on here. There's something, we don't know exactly what it is, but something's going on here. So that we kind of like went with it, and we decided to at that first kind of like jam thing that we did together upstairs. We kind of like worked out The Tower. I mean, not finished it or anything, but kind of worked out bits and pieces of it. And I think Greg had some of it together, and we kind of like worked it out that day, and that was the first song we completed as Angel.
Wow.
Wow.
That's great to come up with your signature song that early on. It's kind of like when Black Sabbath wrote the song Black Sabbath. Like they, you know what I mean? Everything like coalesced and kind of formed around that song. The band found its vision and their purpose after that song. And it almost sounds like Tower played that same role for Angel. Yeah,
it really did. I mean, it was, I've said this before when we do shows now. Tower was the only song that we opened up with as Angel. Wow. The original Angel, we've never ever opened a show with anything else other than Tower. And I know a lot of people used to say, why are you opening up with the song that's most recognizable? I think it was because to us in our head, it was a signature song for us, and it's what kind of got us motivated and going for every single show that we did, because it kind of reminded us all of that first day and the beginning of the band. So, yeah, it never changed. We opened every show with that song.
Well, let's get into that first album. Of course, the song Tower leads off the debut record. Came out, a self-titled record in 1975. What do you remember about the recording and the song? Now, I know it's basically you, Punky, and Greg that were the prime songwriters. Talk about that experience a little bit, Frank, when recording the first record.
Well, I don't want to minimize Barry or Mickey at all, because we kind of, in those early days, we kind of worked out all the little things in between the three of us together. But the band sound that we did when we put the songs together was really coming from those rehearsals that we did as a band. So, arrangements sometimes were done at rehearsal, and we had a period there where when we moved from DC to LA, where we always did, we rehearsed every single day. It was kind of a weird thing. After Angel dissolved, I thought every band did that. Our job is what we did every day. We went into rehearsal somewhere like around 1:00 in the afternoon every day, and finished like around 6:00. And it wasn't until probably maybe the second or third album that Casablanca bought an overdub soundstage in the Gower lot, where it made it a little bit easier for us, so we didn't have to pay for rehearsals all the time. But we were always rehearsing all the time. So that's why the band was really so tight musically, and writing wise too. When after rehearsal, Punky and I would mostly stay after, and because we always kind of wrote together, so he and I would stay after rehearsals and work out little things, or if he had any other ideas to work up, we'd work up new ideas, so we'd have something for the next day. But that's primarily what we did before we went into the recording of the first album. And when we decided to record that album, we really didn't know who to get for a producer, and our manager at the time, David Joseph, is the one that came up with different ideas, and that's when he brought in Big Jim Sullivan and Derek Lawrence.
Derek Lawrence.
Don, why don't you give your take on the debut Angel?
Well, it's funny because, obviously I still have all the original vinyl, but I remember looking and go, why is there only 3 songs on one side and 5 on the second side? That's the kind of detail I focus in on. It's just amazing to come out of the gate with a song like Tower, and, it was really a nice balance between stuff that was maybe a little more proggy, but there, even from the start, there was, a poppy element to it, rock and rollers and on. So, I love that. I sort of love that combo of, and obviously as time went on, it went a little bit more towards the pop angle. But this album I don't know, it just seemed to have the perfect balance of everything.
Yeah, I think back then, as we started out, we knew exactly really what we wanted to do. We wanted to try and kind of fuse the guitar and keyboard thing together. And there weren't a lot of bands that were doing a lot of keyboard stuff, especially synthesizer stuff. So that was one of the main things we wanted to do. And a lot of the stuff like the Tower and Long Time were written upstairs in Bogey. So Long Time was kind of that's kind of a proggy song that we kind of like went through different things to get to. We went through different areas to get through. And of course, when you're recording, you always and writing, there's always stuff like On and On just is one of those songs that just kind of like it kind of wrote itself when we started playing that song. So they were the ones that we worked on very hard, like Long Time, and then stuff like On and Rock and Rollers as well came pretty quickly too, and we started working with that. Rock and Rollers was a song that we wanted to write a song that we could use at live shows, and get the audience to participate in, and that was the reason for writing Rock and Rollers.
All right, Monty, your take.
I think it's a really, really well-formed, well-realized debut. I love the production. I love the sonics. It's a very round mix, lots of low-end subs in it, just, very well recorded. And I would pretty much have to cite the same songs you did, Frank, as the star tracks. And ironically, they're all on side one. Power, Long Time, and Rock and Rollers are just,
right.
Really the meat of the record. It's pretty hard to screw up when you start a record with those three songs introducing a band. But that said, it's not like side two falls down. There's plenty of great shit on side two. And I'm just kind of realizing right now that those are the three best songs on the record. They're all on side one. But just looking back to when I was listening to that record as a kid, I never perceived it as lopsided or anything. It just felt like both, really strong sides of music. So I was thrilled with that when I got it. But I didn't get that at first. I didn't discover Angel, as we'll talk later about, until the White Hot era. So I was going back hearing the debut after the fact, after I had already started with like the popular Angel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I loved it then, and I still love it now.
Well, thanks. I think that both those guys, Big Jim Sullivan and Derek, were the right guys for us back then at that time. It's interesting when I look back at that first album. Didn't really have a Moog on there. It had I think Greg had a Mini, but he started out using an ARP, that's when we first started playing at Bogies. That's what he had. And he still got some really good sounds off that first album. So yeah, I mean, they were Big Jim did so many great records in the '60s, and such a great guitar player. He was Big Jim, and Jimmy Page was Little Jim back in those days. But he never overwhelmed us with that kind of thing. He never overwhelmed Punky with it or us, because we were young kids, when we first started. And the thought of a guy like that, was daunting at first. And then, but when we sat down and started working with them, they were such nice guys. They were really, really great guys. Really listened to what we wanted, and worked with us. And I think that's one of the key things. I think when you have someone that's a producer and a new artist, is kind of not shutting the new artist down, but working with them. You know what I mean? And they did that really well with us for those first two albums.
Oh, it's interesting you touched on the whole synthesizer aspect, Frank, because to me, growing up at that age, that was my first real taste of a band that had like synthesizers. Prior to then, it was like Deep Purple and Hammond organs and Uriah Heep, and this was my first taste of a band that didn't have any Hammond organ. It was all like modern and synthesized and Moog, and so that was very that was eye-opening for me and very different at the time. It was my first experience of a band like that. I don't know if there were bands before you guys really doing that, but to me, you guys were the first that I heard.
I don't know as you say that. I'm trying to think back. I'm sure there might have been, but I don't really. I can't think of it right now. But I
maybe
think
Kansas. Maybe the band.
Kansas. Maybe. Yeah. I remember seeing Kansas open up for Queen. That tour that they opened up for Queen in DC when we were putting Angel together. That was a great show. But yeah, you could be right. Maybe Kansas was close enough.
Yeah, I agree. That was the first time I really heard that. And the beginning of Tower, I'm like Monte. I didn't get it. I think the first Angel album I got into was White Hot, and from grade school, a bunch of Kiss fans turned me on to that, and then I went back and I discovered the first album, and still to this day I would say the debut is my favorite album, and I just love that mystique. I still am a huge Rainbow fan of Blackmore and Dio, and it kind of had that that Rainbow Rising Stargazer feel. It had that real mystique, and I loved that, and and it was very keyboard heavy. Not to say anything against punky, but it seemed like the keyboards were the prime instrument, whereas bands like Deep Purple and even Uriah Heep, it was kind of an equal balance between guitars and keyboards. But this album, Greg, was definitely kind of the highlight, it seemed, particularly on the early albums. But yeah, fantastic. I just love the eerie mystique about the band, and again, that intro was now you hear it's kind of asteroids and all that other stuff, but I think back then it was completely pioneering that sound, and it was like I remember even hearing it, even I heard it a couple years later. I thought, wow, this sounds so cool, this is like so futuristic.
You kind of and you kind of know when it first starts exactly what it is. If you know the band, you know exactly what it is when it starts too.
Exactly.
It is very signature like.
Definitely. And I love the song Sunday Morning too. That's a great tune as well.
That was a fun song to do. Yeah. I remember writing that song. It was a fun song to do. Yeah. We did a lot of shows with now that you mention it, we did a lot of shows with Rainbow because they rehearsed next door to us.
Oh wow.
They were in the soundstage next to us, and then came after they left was Deep Purple with Tommy Bolin. They were next door to us for a while too. But we did a lot of shows with Rainbow, and those were fun shows. It was a good show.
Well, should we move on to the second album, Hell of a Band, released the following year in 1976? Frank, why don't you lead off about that record?
That one was we did spend a lot of time on The Fortune on that album. And I mean, recording wise, writing wise, it was the same process. Although I will say the first album was we were so prepared for the first album because between writing and playing in bogeys in DC and then getting to LA, waiting for our manager to get a record deal, we were rehearsing that whole time. So our focus was to get tight, write, and rehearse. So that's what we did. And some of the songs, I don't remember which songs. It was like one or two songs I think that we had left over from the first album that went to the second album. But when it got to the recording process, we took a lot of time with Fortune because it was the Fortune was had a lot of stuff going on with it, and we really wanted to make sure that it came off right. So I think some of the songs on that album suffered a little bit because of that. But again, when I look back on it, I don't particularly look at one song and say, oh, we should have spent more time. I think about every single song and say, yeah, I'd like to do that. I wish I had done this, but overall, I think it was a great album to do, and I think the last thing that we did on Hell of a Band was, and I think it was after everyone listened to The Fortune, we said, you know what, we have to do something a little bit lighter. There's nothing on this album that's kind of like, light and just straight ahead, and that's when we wrote Any Way You Want It.
Don, what's your thoughts of Hell of a Band?
Well, yeah, like Bob and Monte, I did discover Angel, on White Hot. So so going back and rediscovering the catalog, to me it was like, so now here's the second album. It's out. Of course, back then bands put out an album every year, which never happens anymore. But you have the same production team, and it just sort of kind of picked up where the first album left off. No, I don't think the quality dropped at all. It was, especially back then, it was like, I like that consistency. If you want to compare it to Kiss, it's like, those first two or three albums, there was, kind of consistent. One should have followed the other. So yeah, Hell of a Band followed. It was like great. They're not a one album wonder. And I love the songs. I think there was the poppy stuff, like you said, Any Way You Want It, and it broke up some of the more proggy things. And just another solid album. You didn't have the upside down logo yet, but you were on your way.
No. Yeah, that song, that album, when we recorded that album, we broke in the middle of that to do some shows that we were committed to do with Journey. I remember. That's when
Steve Perry
was with the band then at that time. That's when Ainsley Dunbar was playing drums and
Greg Raleigh.
Greg Raleigh was singing.
Yeah.
And I remember Big Jim came out with us on the road and kind of mixed for us for those shows. But that was a fun break. Usually breaks like that don't help the process, but that was a fun kind of little break that we took. We took it was a 2-week break or a 1-week break or whatever it was, and we came back and just picked up where we left off.
All right. Monty.
Like Don said, I thought it was just it was kind of like part 2 of the debut. It just kind of felt like, it was the same production team, so the sonics were equally rich and round and big on that record. It just felt like a slight evolution up from the debut. I don't know if there was many classic songs on it like on the debut. Certainly, like you said, Frank, The Fortune was a really big track, and I always remember loving Feeling All Right because I love the synthesizer, like the Greg Punky trade-off throughout that song, which you do a lot of on that record. I thought that was fantastic. And, to me, it was just, you guys didn't fall victim. We always talk about the sophomore slump, and so many bands suffer that on the dreaded second record because, the cliche is you have your whole life to write your first record, and then all of a sudden, there's all this pressure on to make the second record. And when you're making the second record, there's expectation because you've put a first record out and people have expectation of what they think it should sound like, and the record company's pressuring you for it, and just everybody's waiting for it. There's so much pressure on the band to write a record and to meet or exceed expectations. So you see so many bands fall down that, on a second record. And I've been through it myself, like probably more times than not as an A&R guy. And you guys pass with flying colors. And, usually when a band makes a great second record, it shows that, it's usually a sign of long life, that that everything's okay. So I thought like it was just business as usual. I thought you guys made I was completely satisfied with that record as an Angel fan. I don't know if I'd say it's better than the debut, but they're both kind of like two halves of one product to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. For us, it was kind of business as usual. We never stopped to think or worry about where it was going or what was happening with it. We would just, like I said, we were focused on writing, rehearsing, and getting the band tight all the time. That's what we were focused on, and that's how we were moving forward. So we never stopped to think about anything else other than that.
Yeah, I love the album. I agree with Monty and Don, and as far as it's a great follow-up second album. I didn't care for the product. I know it's the same production team, but for some reason, I'll have to go back and listen. I prefer the production on the debut. But The Fortune, fantastic song. Again, you kept that real mystical, proggy feel. Getting a little bit more into the hard rock. I love songs like Mirrors and Pressure Point. I was always a big metal guy, so I always liked the heavier songs. But I really appreciated the proggier stuff too. But you mentioned the song Any Way You Want It. That could have been a big radio hit, I thought. I thought it was always really weird for prog bands because prog bands had this kind of, when you talk about Yes and Genesis and ELP, kind of this very, I would say, elitist audience that, love the long songs and love, the musicianship and hate when bands write commercial stuff or even go too heavy or veer away. But I love the fact that Angel was different. You could almost kind of do anything. And it was a lot harder people don't realize a lot of these bands, you look at, Kansas, as you mentioned, Styx, Supertramp, even Journey. It took them 4 or 5 albums before they got a hit song. Before
Right.
Journey got Steve Perry and Kansas got Carry On. Styx actually had the song Lady, which was kind of a hit, but until Grand Illusion came out, these bands, and that was the cool thing about the 70s is you built up this kind of following, and of course nowadays record labels don't give you that that longevity, but that one was I just really saw the band maturing on this album and the albums that followed, and you kind of did your own thing. It was a very unique band, Angel, especially for a U.S. band.
Yeah, I don't think that we ever worried about what niche that we wanted to be in. We were there to play music, and I think a lot of that comes from being a Beatle fans as well. But being a Beatle fan, it's like every album they came out with was different. So we never really thought of putting ourselves or boxing ourselves into anything. I mean, we were a very powerful band live. So that's the way we wrote. And whether it was like a prog song or a pop song, the song was very powerful. Usually live, it was a very powerful song to do, because we always performed the songs when we went out. We performed the songs from our last album, which you can't do that anymore either.
Right.
I remember when I went to see Zeppelin, so many times I saw Zeppelin, and I always was waiting to see how they would play the songs off their new album. And that's what we did when we toured. But you don't do that anymore because audiences don't want that anymore. They want to hear the older stuff, and they want to hear the stuff that it's recognizable with the band. They're not so much interested in newer stuff anymore. I don't know what the reason is for that, but it's unfortunate because there's so much new stuff out there that really is good and can go to another level. Because like you were saying, in the 70s we built stuff up. You know what I mean? You build up the character and of the band and the essence of the band, because you grow as you play, and you don't get a chance to do that these days.
Very true, absolutely. Well, let's move on to the 1977 classic album, On Earth as It Is in Heaven. Frank, talk about your experience with that album. Of course, Eddie Kramer producing. Yeah.
Yes. Eddie Kramer. That was a fun album to do. I must say, I enjoy working with Eddie, and I see Eddie every once in a while, and it was an interesting album. What we did was when Eddie came on board. That was when Casablanca wanted us to do a little bit more of radio accessible songs. You listen to your record company because you figure they're the guys that are selling the records, and it's not like we said, okay, well we're going to write all pop stuff. We understood what they were asking, and we tried to do what they were asking, as well as keep in the same form that we were writing and playing in. And when Eddie came on board, he was open to a different way of doing things. And what we did was Gary Kellgren, who owned the record plant with Mike Stone in L.A. I think they owned the one in California at the time and the one in New York. But Gary was mostly involved with the one in L.A. at the time. And he had this castle right above Sunset Boulevard. So what we did was we sat down one night with Gary and Eddie, and we talked about how we wanted to record stuff and different ideas that we had. So this was going to be an album of great adventures. What we did was we got different sounds in different rooms. We had monitors. We had Barry's drum kit set up. One kit set up downstairs in like a cement room, and another one set up upstairs in a big room. So we had different sounds, and we had monitors whatever room when we were tracking, so that we could see each other if we were in different rooms. And at the time, we were trying to use the record plant's mobile truck, and at that time, Stevie Wonder was was putting his studio together, and he had that truck there for I don't know how many years, but he had the truck there with him, so we couldn't use the that truck, and the other truck was out on the road somewhere. So what we did was we found Debbie Reynolds' son, who was just starting out doing from Todd A.O. They did all that sound for movies and stuff. He was just putting together something for a mobile truck. So Gary pulled him into the whole thing, and we met with him, and he set up his mobile truck out there, and we went ahead and recorded in this castle, which was very interesting. I remember doing the vocal to telephone exchange in this round room. We dropped a microphone from the top of the ceiling and did one up very close to get this different kind of sound that we were able to get in recording it that way. But there was a lot of that kind of experimental stuff going on back then.
Monty, why don't you give your take on this album?
Well, I gotta say, I know that a lot of Angel fans don't look at this like as highly as the first two records. It was the start of the band writing in a popular direction. There's a lot of critique about Eddie Kramer's mix. I've read a lot of people feel it's muddy sounding. But I got to say, and maybe this will be like the first real time I'm going out on a limb, probably versus a consensus, I think this record's fucking amazing. I mean, this may very well, could possibly be my favorite Angel record. First of all, I don't find it to sound muddy at all. And I think the production and the fact that it's more of a hard rock record actually gives it more of a timeless feel to me. So as much as I may like the first two Angel records, you put them on and, there's a certain dated sound to it. It's of its time. Right. Whereas to me, On Earth is just more timeless. I don't necessarily put it on and think mid-'70s. I just think this is a great hard rock record. There was still tons of balls on it. I mean, Can You Feel It's crushing, On the Rocks, Cast the First Stone. I mean, it was not a light record. And then even the poppy stuff, like, Telephone Exchange is one of my favorite songs. She's a Mover, fucking, like, I'd put that in my, top one of my favorite Angel songs. So I have nothing but great things to say about that record. I think it's, possibly my favorite record next to White Hot for Angel. And I don't think many fans would glow about it the way I am, but I think it's an amazing, amazing record. I can't say enough great things about it. And, and then, of course, there's the whole cover thing, which I'll leave. I know Don wants to talk about that, so Don, I'll let you talk about the amazing album cover and the Ambiogram logo and all that.
The story is sort of well documented about the Angel logo that we've all come to know and love that if Frank wants to retell. But, obviously we this is the album, Monty, where it all came together. And you're right. This is my favorite Angel album. I still
wow, you agree with me. Great. I thought everybody was going to disagree.
No, I still have the poster that came with the album. You have the logo. I know anybody under 40 would Telephone Exchange. You're going to have to change the words up a little bit. But other than that, there's nothing dated on here. Every song's a home run, really. And I thought Eddie Kramer brought a lot production-wise, and I don't know what else to say, man. It's I came up with White Hot, and that was always my favorite for the longest time. But the more I listened to this one, this one's just solid through and through.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did. I remember doing. I think I did the vocal to "Can You Feel It" in. I think I did that at Electric Lady, I believe, and I remember the two songs that I did in New York were "Can You Feel It" and "Just a Dream," I believe. And I remember we took a break and mixing because we ran out of time at the record plant in New York, so we had to switch over to Electric Lady, and there was like 4 days in between there that we had a break, and I went back home to Boston to see my parents. I took a train. And I remember finishing up Just a Dream on that train ride back because there were things that I wasn't really happy with and stuff. So I kind of rewrote a lot of the stuff. And the whole thing that I rewrote was on that train ride back. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do with it when I got back to New York. And after the break, I was really ready to go again.
No one mentioned the roomy drum sound, like it sounds like you guys were going for that Bonham-esque.
I was just going to say that,
sound, which I love. I mean, maybe that contributes to some people's feelings of it sounding a little muddy. I don't know. They're just not used to hearing so much room in a mix. But I thought that was the standout. I love the drum sound on that record. Sorry for stealing your thunder.
No, it's funny. I was going to mention exactly that. It's because I believe Zeppelin did Zeppelin 4 in a castle too, where they did When the Levee Breaks, and it has that kind of similar big drum sound. I don't know if that was like an Eddie Kramer a thing, but
no, I think that was Andy.
Andy Johns.
Andy
okay,
Johns,
that's right. Yeah. But definitely it has that. Sometimes I think maybe a little bit too much in certain places, but definitely, definitely a different sound at that time. Very big sound. And I got to say, Cast the First Stone, probably my favorite Angel song. Love, I mean,
oh my God,
such a heavy riff.
And we didn't,
Go ahead, Monty. Say your praise.
And wait, we didn't talk about White Lightning again just now because we talked about it at the beginning. But my God, that's another one of my favorite Angel tracks on that record.
Absolutely. Both those sound great songs. I think it continued with the great songwriting. Can You Feel It? Great opening song. Again, it's a third album. You've moved a little bit more in the, a little bit less, obviously a little bit less progressive on this and going more of the hard rock phase. Still never really had that radio hit, unfortunately. And I know that was something big with Casablanca, having, the Donna Summers and the Village People and, of course, Kiss.
Yeah, I think that was a bit of a problem for them as well. They had a lot of that kind of stuff going on. So when they walked into a radio station, they weren't known as the guys that had rock stuff. They were known as the guys that had Donna Summer, disco, Donna Summer and disco stuff. And so I don't think a lot of the radio stations took them very serious when it came to rock and roll stuff.
Yeah, which is unfortunate.
I mean, I could be guessing at that, but,
I was just going to say, because Frank mentioned going to Boston, and that made me think of the acoustic breakdown in the middle of Telephone Exchange always reminded me of the band Boston. And I don't know what the timeline is. I wonder if that was...
Oh, yeah.
Here's something interesting.
You're right, Don.
Now that you brought that up, when I went for that break, I went back to Boston. My cousin was a hair cutter back in Boston on Newbury Street at that time. He calls me up and he says, "Listen, I hear you're back in town, and then you're doing an album, this and that." He said, "But I have this guy that comes in all the time, and I think he's managing this band, and they're looking for a singer." I said, "But I'm tied up right now. I'm sorry, I'm getting it mixed up. This is just before the first album came out." But anyway, I'll tell you the story. I was back in Boston before the first album came out, and he said, "I get this band out here that's looking for a singer." So I said, "I'm tied up right now. I'm in a new project that I'm doing, and I really, I don't have any interest in, going out and singing for a band." And he said, "No, please do it for me." He said, "I told the guy that you would come down and this and that." Well, needless to say, it's my cousin. So I said, "All right, I'll go." So I take the train into, I think it was Dorchester or something, and to this house, walk into this house, and there's these guys there that are putting this band together, and they played me a song or two from the band. Then we went downstairs and kind of jammed. We did Maybe I'm Amazed and a couple of other tunes. I left, went back home, and then the guy calls me. He says, "I think we can do something together. Maybe we can do another rehearsal." And I said, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm kind of locked up with what I'm doing now, and I'm heading back to DC to work on this band that I just put together. So I really can't do it." He said, "Okay, thanks." Well, that was Tom Scholz, and the band at that time was called Mother's Milk, I believe. It wasn't Boston yet. And I think the song that they played for me must have been More Than a Feeling. Wow. But it wasn't, obviously it wasn't, Brad wasn't in the band yet, and he hadn't sang with them yet. So it wasn't Brad singing it or anything. And it's kind of hazy right now. And I think it was the first time that the bass player, Fran, I think his name was, it was his first time down there. It was a different drummer, but Tom did most of the talking. So I talked a lot with Tom back then. But it was it was an interesting side.
It figured, because as you were telling the story, I kind of figured out, who you were talking about. But especially when you said you went down to the basement to work on a song, because you always hear about Tom Schultz in his basement, like making that first Boston record. The minute you said basement, I'm like, all right, it's Boston.
Right, and oddly enough, we both came out with the first album the same year.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
and that's a piece of Angel history I was completely unaware of. So that's a good gem.
No, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of similarities. You listen to A Long Time with the keyboard solo, and it's kind of like Tower. And there's definitely, when you talk about synth bands, Boston was one of those that kind of started out around that same time.
Yeah, and Rainbow too, actually.
Terror Woman,
back then.
Very cool. Well, should we move on to, I guess, Monte and Don's favorite album, White Hot? Again, yes. you did albums.
I don't know if it's my favorite. It's either that or On Earth, but those are the two.
It's a 1978. Well, why don't you start? Frank, why don't you talk about that first?
Again, White Hot was like, now that was the next level that we went up to with White Hot was, I think by the time we got to White Hot, a lot of us were kind of like breaking off into different factions and writing. We weren't writing together as much as we did for those first few albums. We were writing more on our own and then bringing the ideas down. Barry and I started writing together a lot more, and I think we became more of songwriters in a different way when it got to White Hot. And again with Lee DiCarlo and Eddie Leonetti, it was the same along the same track. They were open to any ideas that we had. We had Studio C at the record plant, and we had Barry's drums mic'd up on a stage, mic'd through a PA. So we were going for not big, but huge, just trying to get ridiculously huge stuff at that time. Everything was like at the point where everything was starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger, So we tried a lot of different things. We had the drum kit in a vocal booth that was in Studio C that was all mirrors. It didn't work that great, but we were always experimenting with stuff like that. And I think we were the last ones to use the big organ for the Christmas song, which was changed to the winter song, because after we were done with that record, Studio C burned down.
Oh wow!
So I think we were the last record that was recorded there. I know Stephen Stills came in after that, and I don't know if he did any recording after that, but we were the last project to finish up in Studio C.
Don, why don't you give us your take?
Well, it's this album, I guess my first impression was like, because especially back then, bands really didn't change members, and it was like, whoa, there's a new person in the band.
Yeah.
Felix Robinson comes in. And this album, is my first Angel album ever. And when I heard Got Love If You Want It, that it was all over for me. That's my favorite Angel song to this day. Whenever I hear it, it just blows my mind out. So, but then going back, obviously, again, and listening in sequence, again, this is an album that really follows On Earth in the sequence. It seems like a natural progression. It sort of picks up where On Earth left off. So, just another solid album with my favorite song on it. And I remember when I was a DJ on my college radio station, I must have played Got Love If You Want It every hour. I couldn't get enough of it.
Well, getting Felix in the band, we knew Felix, before he joined the band. And when he came down and played with us, he's such a great bass player that, the band just meshed together musically for the live sound so easily and so nicely that it was great. It was a great feeling.
Monte.
Well, this album will always have a special place in my heart because it was the first Angel record I ever got, and I was 13 years old, and because of that, there's so much nostalgia attached to it. They say that the music you listen to as a teenager is music that will remain with you for the rest of your life. No matter where you go and where your tastes evolve, you will always be able to put on a record that you listened to when you were 13 and 14 and love it because you're transported back to that magical era when music was able to make an impact on you like like it never would be able to as much later on. So I just have such amazing nostalgia connected to that record. But, you know, it's funny because Don and Bob, you guys, it was all our first Angel record.
Yep.
So I don't know if that means we're all the same age. 'Cause I'm 56. Bob,
I'm 55, going to be 56 in October, so around that same age.
And Don?
53.
Well,
He's the baby.
Okay, well, all right. Well, then Don, but see, Don doesn't really fit into that then as far as like, because I'm just trying to figure out why that was our first record. And I know that I discovered the band, you know, because I started reading rock magazines at 13. So I was reading Hit Parader and Circus. And you know, maybe the label was really behind that record because I remember seeing a ton, like all the magazines that I was reading as a kid, all 3 or 4 of them at the time, had like full page ads for White Hot. And that's what, you know, so it seemed like the label was behind it promotionally at the time. And that's what made me get the record. And I got it, I'm trying to think, the record came out in 77. So I think I got it in the winter of 77. Mm-hmm. I can remember there was this ginormous snowstorm in January, like a blizzard. We had like 20 inches of snow outside. And I remember playing in the snow. And, you know, when you're all at frostbitten and you come in and you want to warm up. And I remember listening to the winter song. I mean, I can't not hear the winter song without thinking of that snowstorm in January 78, being 13 years old. It's like, I mean, I will love that song forever. I like that it's the winter song, not the Christmas song, because it just means, it makes it even more timeless, you know, like winter, you know, it's not like specifically Christmas, but more winter. It's probably a little bit more politically correct now to have it winter rather than like focus it on Christmas alone.
Well, what happened with that was, you're right. I think the label was really behind that record. And what happened with that was Eddie Lee and Eddie and I always would talk about the old Phil Spector sound and the Wall of Sound and all that stuff, and how they used to do Christmas songs and this and that. And what happened was that Greg and Barry always used to, even when we rehearsed, way back when we first started rehearsing in L.A., they would always be there first. And they would always be going through these different things. And that's how they played together a lot. And that's how we used to always start Greg's solo live. So they had this idea that they were playing around with and never really amounted to anything. So Eddie said, listen, why don't you try and get it more closer to like a song arrangement, and let's just record it, because we had already had all the songs that we needed for the album through pre-production. So when we got into the record plant, we did record it, and it just kind of laid there. And we went through the whole thing, the discussions with Casablanca and everything. And as we were recording, we were still adding stuff to this little piece that they had and then expanding on that. And what happened was, because of Eddie and I talking about the Wall of Sound and Phil Spector and talking about, remember when they had all those Christmas songs, and so that we decided that let's make a Christmas song. No one's done that in years. At that time, 77, 78, no one was doing any Christmas songs anymore. So we said, let's make a Christmas song. So that's what we did. We made a Christmas song. We recorded the whole album. We sat down with Neil and we said, listen, we got the album. It's finished, but we have a bonus. We recorded a Christmas song. So Neil said, I love that idea. What we'll do is we'll get it printed in white vinyl. We'll send it to the radio stations. And it wasn't even going to be on the record. Not even going to be in White Hot. That was just a separate kind of like thing that was going to be sent out to radio stations as a teaser about the new Angel album coming out. And what happened was, I guess a few of the promo people in Casablanca loved the song, but they said, well, we can't put it on the record because it's a Christmas song. Well, I said, well, I don't want it to be put on the record. I want it to be a Christmas song. They said, no, you got to change it. You got to change it so that we can put it on the record. And I said, I don't want to do that. But, we sat down and had these meetings with Bruce Bird and Neil kind of like would just sit and kind of listen to the discussions going on. And eventually, the band started to acquiesce to it. And I was the last holdover. And I said, to go back in there and redo all those vocals, change all the lyrics is like kind of crazy to me. But if that's what you guys want to do, I'll do it. So that's what I did. I went back in, and the vocal on that was it just happened to be it was odd because when I did the Christmas song, I did the vocal, and what we used to do is we used to put the vocal on like 5 or 6 different tracks, and then make a comp. I like this. I like this line here. I like that line there, and I'd listen to it, and then I'd go back in and try and redo that comp that I put together so that it would have a more of a live sound to it, a real sound. But when we did it, we were listening back. I had said to Eddie, "Do me a favor." I said, "Just flip up. Let's just flip up all 5 of those tracks." And the vocals were so close that and sounded so thick that we decided to go in and fix it and keep those 5 tracks of vocals together, and that's how we got that vocal sound for the song. And then to try and go back and redo it to the winter song was like even crazier. So
what you're saying, you had the layers on Christmas song so that it made it even more daunting to think that you're going to have to redo it for winter song.
And we had already had the California Boys Choir recorded on the Christmas song. So when they're singing Christmas, we had to take the tape and put it in reverse. So they're singing it backwards. they're singing Christmas backwards. So because we didn't want to take them out of it. So.
I got to go listen to that again. I never noticed anything remiss about that. Yeah. I got to focus on the. But Frank, it's interesting also that you're mentioning the wall of sound in Phil Spector, because I never even realized that. But about that song, which now it all makes sense, but. It's almost like not just that song, like this wall of sound you're describing. I hear it on the production of the whole record,
yes.
Really.
Yeah, you're right.
It's just such a bombastic, big sound. So kind of like, I don't know, a little bit more of a return to the first 2 records, just because On Earth As It Is in Heaven was so live and raw sounding, like a band on a stage. There was so much less, it just sounded less produced than the first 2 records in many ways, where I thought you got that back with White Hot and then some. But it really is like just wall of sound, like you said, especially like the beginning of Under Suspicion, like that. Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about a bottom drum sound. That's fucking gargantuan. Yeah. The beginning of that song. But my favorites, like Don said, I mean, it's hard to argue with "Got Love If You Want It" with the. It's got that like little funky bass that you hear peeking out at the beginning.
That's
Stick Like Glue, Don't Leave Me Lonely. A little weird to open the record with that, but still a great song. The Rascals cover, right. Under Suspicion, Over and Over. It's a fucking great record. Man, maybe it is better than I
I totally agree with Monty, and it's funny because I remember how much promo when this record came out. Of course, I was in 7th grade, and that was when Kiss was the big thing, and I remember a lot of Kiss fans talking about Angel, and then I would open up Circus and Hit Parader, and on the inside front cover would be the big Angel ad for White Hot. I'm thinking, man, these guys look cool. And
yeah.
Incidentally,
that's how
we discovered stuff. And I remember, I think I told this to Frank before, but Angel was the first time I heard the term glam rock. I wasn't aware back in the 70s, bands like Bowie and Sweet were called that. But I remember it was either in a magazine or somebody said, "Oh yeah, Angel, they're glam rock." And I'm thinking, wow, what a cool word. That makes sense. They are kind of glamorous looking, and glam rock. What a cool, because that was before all the different kind of titles. It was just hard rock, and heavy metal wasn't even used back then that much. Right. So I'm hearing glam rock. I go, wow, that's kind of interesting. But anyway, great sound. I do agree. The production is great, and I do remember the Rascal song "Ain't Gonna Eat Out My Heart Anymore" was starting to get a bit of radio play, and I thought, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I remember it did get some radio airplay at that time.
Yeah, and I thought it would really take off the record. Going back, I do remember because as I said, I went back and I was such a big fan of the first Angel record. I was a little bit disappointed that this wasn't as you really lost the progginess. It seems like the band really took a 360. And now going back and listening to it, there are some great songs on that record, but I kind of did miss the epic, the mystique of Angel, and lyrically and musically, it didn't really have that, not just that prog feel, but that kind of, medieval mystique about the band, about castles and, dragons. And you were doing that, like right around the same time as Rainbow was. So it was kind of a very unique thing, long before Manowar and all these power metal bands, So it was a really cool concept. But, and that kind of got lost on this record. It was definitely a drastic change. I was going to say, did you lose a lot of the, old fans, you think, a lot of the old prog Angel fans when this album came out? Was it like a real going for a whole new audience kind of thing?
Probably, I guess, but a lot of times I think fans back then I think stayed a little bit more. If they saw the band live, we didn't lose anything.
Sure, that was
because I remember. A lot of people, even artists. I remember Ted Nugent saying, "I thought you guys were more like kind of like the Moody Blues." Right. When we played with him, I said, "No, we're nothing like the Moody Blues." I mean, as far as like playing live, we were like a straight ahead, heavy rock and roll band, and even those proggy songs that we played were. We approached them the same exact way. They were very pronounced and very heavy live. So we weren't, we were by no means that kind of thing. And I think that if you had seen Angel live, you probably stayed with the band. If you hadn't seen Angel live, then I'm sure there was a chance of losing some fans back then when we changed over. But I think with the band, we never kind of like I said, we never pigeonholed ourselves anywhere musically. So I think there were different phases that we went through, and it would have been interesting to see the next album and the album after that, if we might have gone back to some of the more proggy sounding things or interwoven them with some of the newer stuff that we were doing at the time as well. But we never stayed in anything too long. We always kind of like moved around a little bit,
And another big promotional thing the record company did is you had a full billboard on Sunset Boulevard. Apparently you did on the last album too. I saw in that book, And Earth as It Is in Heaven. But I remember the White Hot, a lot of people talking about on Sunset Boulevard. There's this giant angel billboard, which, was a huge deal back in those days.
That was a big deal back then. Yes. Tower Records, it was like about a block away from Tower Records where the billboard was. The first one was On Earth.
Right.
And the big one was White Hot.
I remember driving down Sunset years ago and seeing the Ted Nugent for Weekend Warriors out there with the gun and all that. I'm thinking, wow, this is the coolest thing ever.
I remember the first time when we got to LA coming from the East Coast, we had a house up in the hills. It was a band house and stuff. And, you come down on Sunset Boulevard, and the first thing we saw was this big John Lennon poster, billboard. It was like, it was a rock and roll billboard. It was so cool. I thought, oh man, this is cool.
Right on. So should we move on to Sinful, 1979, the final studio release by Angel. Frank, talk about this album.
This album was kind of a disjointed album. We didn't, we were talking about doing a live album. Then Neil came up with the idea of maybe recording half of the album live. It was always changing. It never really kind of like, we never got like our teeth into it. You know what I mean? It was, it just seemed to be kind of like, we had the songs together and stuff, and we were still progressing live, and some of the songs that we did record on the Sinful album, we started playing live before we recorded them, and we ended up recording 4 or 5 of them in Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, where we did the show there. We mic'd it up with a mobile truck from the record plant. And there was no one in the audience there. I mean, we just had the whole arena to ourselves, and we tried to see what we could get sound-wise. And I can't remember which songs that were recorded there that we kept. We kept the bed tracks and stuff, and and I can't remember which ones they were. But like I said, it was kind of a disjointed album when we recorded it because of all the unknowns that were going on at that time. But it was still a good album. We didn't have Studio C any longer because it had burned down. So we did a lot of stuff in E, which was a smaller studio, and mostly vocals. And we did some recording at Devlin Recording Studios in the Valley, I believe it was. I remember tearing down a big door to get a wood on the floor so that we could put Barry's drums on like a wood platform to reflect the sound and stuff. So we were still doing different kind of things recording wise, but like I said, that album was a little bit disjointed for us because we didn't know exactly. We weren't locked in to what we usually were at the time.
Monty, why don't you give us your take?
I was let down with that record as a fan. It was just, to me, it was a step too far into pop territory. It didn't really have the teeth that White Hot did. Even the production, it's not underproduced or raw like, it's not raw sounding like On Earth as It Is in Heaven, but it's smaller sounding than White Hot production-wise. I thought, if anything, that this record should have had a similar production because the songs lent themselves even more to that. So I thought sonically it was a bit of a step down, and it just went too far for me. I have to say I wasn't really that into it. I mean, you didn't lose me as a fan at the time, but I was let down. But, what I've done over the years, of course, I've reappraised the record because as you get older and you get more mature, it's no longer about how heavy, you no longer judge a record at this age on how heavy it is. You just judge it on the songcraft and the writing. And I have to say that now as an adult, I have a much more an appreciation for that record because I could put it on and I'm no longer concerned about if it's heavy, just if it's good. And I definitely like that record way more now than I did as a teenager. But also there's a lot of nostalgia attached to that record because the first and only time I ever saw Angel back in the day was the Sinful Tour. I saw you guys with Molly Hatchet opening at the Capitol Theater in Passaic, New Jersey, February 1979, my second show ever.
Wow.
So yeah, I guess I don't think you or Bob, I don't think you or Don could say that you saw the original Angel back then.
I unfortunately never did.
Yeah, so that was my second rock concert ever. I remember my dad drove me and a few friends there, including my friend Scott Miller, who I know is going to be listening to this. So shout out to
What's
Scott
up,
Miller.
Scott?
Yeah, and I remember we were so excited to see the holograms and how the band would come out on stage, and everything went flawlessly. There were no malfunctions. Nobody got stuck inside the pod like Spinal Tap. And I just remember it being such an amazing night. I'd love to go back and see it again. And also, I didn't give two shits about Molly Hatchet back then. Like I really could care less. They were just the band that was opening, and I've since become such a ginormous Molly Hatchet fan that I'd love to go back to that show. Just, I saw Molly Hatchet with Danny Joe Brown. I mean, how many people can say that?
Yeah.
Right.
So, So anyway, there's a ton of nostalgia attached to Sinful for me.
It's interesting that show. It reminds me of this. The Molly Hatchet show that you're talking about reminds me of the same thing that happened with Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush in Hammond, Indiana. Both those guys came off of like really big shows. I think Mahogany Rush had just come off California Jam, and I think Molly Hatchet had just come off a big show as well, a big
Florida Jam or something, or Texas.
It was something like that, and I can't remember which one it was. Yeah, so when they came in, it was all this, they didn't want to be opening for another band and this and that, and so. But once you start acclimating and knowing who the other guys are, it becomes a lot easier for you. Because you're always overwhelmed by what you have to go back to do, and if you're not prepared to go back to that square one, then it gets a lot tougher for you. So it took a little bit of time, but yeah, I think both bands got along really well after that. But it was interesting. Both both those things I can remember. Both those situations were similar.
It was just such an there were so many odd pairings in the 70s,
Yes.
much more than now. Now, like when tours go out, it's all bands that for the most part fit. But back then, you'd see like Gentle Giant opening for Black Sabbath, or Yes with Black Sabbath, or Angel with Molly Hatchet, and But you look at Molly Hatchet, these like redneck, like beer drinking, like badass dudes. They're probably looking at you guys in your white tights, thinking, "What the fuck is this?
What's this? What the fuck is this? We're gonna open for these guys, but like I said, once we got on stage and played, then it was, then the mutual respect is kind of works its way out. We did a show. We opened up for Three Dog Night, which was so bizarre. So bizarre. It was in South Carolina, and I remember, we come out there in our spandex, and and all these mothers are there with their little daughters, and it was just not right. It was just not right.
Don, why don't you give us your take on Sinful?
Yeah, I mean, I like what Monty said about, especially with Time in the Rearview Mirror, is to when I listen to this album, I'm like, man, there really are a lot of great songs on here. I love Bad Time. I love Wild and Hot. And songs off this album, definitely fit into the live show as well. But I think for me, it suffered because, again, starting with White Hot, I instantly went back and rediscovered the rest of the catalog. So then by the time this comes, by the time I hear this,
right,
it's like, I'm just getting into the Tower and stuff like that. So this seemed like a pretty big departure at the time. But again, with Time in the Rear View, and I listened to it, I'm like, yeah, these are great, solid songs. And obviously at the time we didn't know this was going to be the last studio record or any of that stuff. So it's kind of like when Kiss did Dynasty and then into Unmasked, they they lost their fans because it was too big of a departure. But that kind of stuff never threw me for a curve. I never saw Angel, in your prime live, and I never gave up. So, to me, again, it was, I took the album for what it was. It's one in a sequence of great albums. And, I'd probably actually listen to this one more than the other ones now because I don't know the songs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find the same thing, Don. Like you want to listen, you want to invest more time in this record because you're less burned on it than the other ones. But I agree with you too. Is that White Hot was my first Angel record, so of course I went backwards and got into all the old heavier stuff. And then when Sinful came out, from that to Sinful felt like such a big departure. But yeah, a lot of these records get reappraised. I mean, another perfect example is Kiss's Dynasty. I know nobody liked that record on release. Now you put that record on, and it's like, with everything that's come after it with Kiss, it's like it kind of sounds like a classic Kiss record. As different as it is, people love Dynasty, and they hated it back then. So it's just nice how that happens, how records get reappraised over the years.
Yeah. I have to agree. I had the same feelings of all of you, and I agree with you, Frank. It did seem very disjointed. I don't know if it was Casablanca that was kind of pushing the band in more of a popular direction, because I know, like I mentioned on White Hot, you were starting to get a little bit of traction with, the Rascal song, Ain't Gonna Eat Out My Heart Anymore, and I'm thinking, okay, they might be thinking, all right, now it's really time to break the band on radio. Was that kind of the case with this album?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of pressure from Casablanca with that kind of thing, but at the same time, I think a lot of it had to do with it was kind of a little bit kind of rushed. Like I said, we didn't have Studio C at the record plant, so we were kind of like disjointed as far as where we were going to do the bed tracks, as far as to get the sound that we wanted, and we were moving from different studios that we weren't comfortable with. It was a little bit, and like I said, some of them were recorded at the Civic Center, so it was just a little bit disjointed for us, I think, and I think that kind of attributed to the whole kind of feeling of the album,
Hey, can I make a quick point, because we keep bringing up we're saying the word poppy, and I know in some circles that would have a negative connotation, but to me, to this day, that's a compliment. I think when you say that has a poppy element to it, it means it's a well-constructed song. Sure. So I just want that to be clear, because I always think no matter how heavy a band is, there should be a pop element to what they do. That's what makes songs catchy. That's what makes songs stick in your head. That's what, why you get earworms and
Absolutely.
sing-along songs. So yeah, and I think, again, it's the thing with Angel, just as a general thought, is, I could never really put my finger on exactly why I like the band. I didn't particularly like bands with a heavy synthesizer sound. I didn't necessarily like prog bands. I didn't necessarily like glam bands, but I liked all the elements of all those bands, and I liked different bands in those genres. But, there was nothing I could point to go, yeah, why did I like Greg Giuffria's real out front, keyboard sound, and I didn't like it in other bands? I don't know. I just did.
Yeah. I think we were careful enough to because we knew what we were like live, that we never really became too self-indulgent in even the first two albums, with being kind of like you were talking about earlier with Emerson, Lake and Palmer and those bands as being like above anything. Of course, if anyone was able or should have been, it was Emerson, Lake and Palmer. They were great guys, but I mean great players. But like I said, with Angel, we were never really self-indulgent in that kind of stuff, and that's why it was easy for us to move from one genre to the next and even go back to it. So like I said, it would have been interesting to see where the next album would have taken us, but that never happened.
Yeah.
One thing we should touch on here:
bad publicity.
We never talked about the album cover for this record, because if I assume that people listening to this, for the most part, are diehard Angel fans, and as you know, when you look at Sinful, the album cover looks like business as usual, but the record was originally titled Bad Publicity, and had an uncharacteristic shot of Angel, like basically partying in a hotel room with chicks, like as bad boys. And it was actually pressed up and ready to come out, and then scrapped at great expense with product destroyed to retool it.
Right.
Can you tell us that whole story, Frank?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing that we talked about. Barry Levine had done we had done a lot of work with Barry Levine, and Barry was always open. He was a great friend of ours. He and Barry Brandt lived together for a while. And I'm really close with his brother Alan, who lives out here, and I see all the time as well. And I still talk to Barry, but he did a lot of our stuff, and we came up with the concept of doing this scene in the Hyatt House and plastering it with all bad reviews of the band, and that's what we came up with for Bad Publicity. So it was the cover of that shot, and plastered like newspaper bad reviews of all record reviews of the band live, any bad reviews we could find, we plastered it all over that record thing. And when Neil saw it, he didn't like it at all. And we had gotten to the point where they had pressed a few thousand, I think.
But it got pressed without Neil signing off on it?
It got pressed because I don't know if he wasn't there at the time and someone okayed it. But yeah, I have a couple of the albums left, but they pulled it really quick, and some of the Sinful labels on the vinyl, some of them, if you pull the Sinful off, you can see there's a Bad Publicity one underneath it.
Oh wow!
Right, or I think some copies went out even with the Bad Publicity labels, like just completely intact, like without even covering them. I believe.
You could be right.
Do you think, Frank, looking back, do you think the record would have been more or less successful with that old original cover?
I don't know if the cover would have made a difference, but it would have been a great cover to have. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of that bad boy stuff happening then, and having it recorded on an album cover. You know what I mean? So especially for a band that comes out dressed in white and everyone thinks is kind of like the Moody Blues.
Well, that's the interesting thing I was going to bring up, because it's one of those what if kind of things, and you hate to go back, but it was at that time, of course, the 80s started that whole Motley Crue and the bad boy image. I always thought Angel was always a step ahead of all the 80s, what you call hair metal, glam metal, whatever. You had that look, that image, that sound. but you didn't have the bad boy. It wasn't promoted as this bad boy image. It was almost promoted as this nice band in white kind of thing. And even back then, of course, Van Halen came out with David Lee Roth. He was kind of this bad boy, outspoken guy. Of course, Ted Nugent was heavily outspoken, bad boy image, his Tarzan image. You had Bon Scott with his swagger, and of course, Steven Tyler. That was kind of at the start of the bad boy image. And, I did read a lot about you guys in Cream or in Circus. They had like live photos and all that, but there wasn't this outspoken bad boy image about you, which I think maybe could have. Because, when you do make that transition into a prog to kind of a hard rock / metal band, that was it seemed like a key with a lot of those other bands. It was when the whole bad boy image was starting to really pop up. And I remember being in school, that was always the coolest thing. Oh, look at Steven Tyler, how badass he looks.
Well, but you did keep a little bit of that. I think maybe like a little compromise or holdover for the retooling of Sinful was, if you remember, the inner sleeve showed the guys like against the wall, like criminals.
Yeah, that's true.
So that was a little bit of that, like, different kind of less glammy looking angel in the inner sleeve. I don't think a
whole lot of people got that, though.
and I guess we should bring up, this is about the time or when you did the Foxes soundtrack. And I do remember seeing as a kid, and there wasn't much live footage on the movie Foxes, but just that little live footage and seeing, I think it was Punky that had the beer bottle playing it like a slide guitar and then spilling the beer in the audience. And, as a kid, you're thinking, God damn, that's badass. How fucking cool is that,
I would go see that movie just to see like 10 seconds of Angel. I mean, there was no MTV. There was no way to see your heroes back then except in concert. So the fact that you could see even a few seconds of Angel in a movie was like enough to make me go.
And there was so much more film shot of that whole thing that they never used.
Well, that was what bugged me, because Angel was such a, again, I wasn't able to see the band live, but everyone I knew that saw the band, just as you were saying, Frank, they were blown away by the live band. And all those bands back in the day, of course, this is before MTV, but, all the bands from the 70s did something on Don Kirshner's or Midnight Special, and something, you would stay up late at night to watch your favorite band, religiously. And Angel never did anything like that. Why is that?
Well, we did eventually do Don Kirshner, but the reason why we didn't do that show earlier was because we had seen that show before, and what we wanted to do is we wanted to have our own sound guy mix, because we were worried about the mix live, and they say, "Oh no, we're not. We don't do that. It's union, and they have to mix the sound." I said, "Well, then we'll send you a video." They said, "Well, we don't play videos." I said, "Okay, well then we won't do the show." So we never did the show until finally they allowed videos. They still wouldn't let us mix. That's why we never played it live, but we did finally do a video, and I forget which songs they were and which videos they were, but we did do the show eventually. We did Top of the Pops, which was obviously UK. They were fine with videos and stuff, but Midnight Special we didn't do either. And it came down to us wanting to come off right live, and we wanted to be in control of the sound. And they wouldn't acquiesce to that kind of thing.
And you still can't find any live Angel footage out there, which is really a shame, because it'd be something great to look back on YouTube.
The only live footage of Angel, I think, is on Super 8 with no sound. Some people snuck in some, back then. You remember, the video cameras back then were huge.
Yeah.
And no one allowed anyone to bring in cameras or video cameras into shows. You couldn't do that. There was no phone video and no phone pictures back then, so you weren't allowed to bring that stuff into shows. I don't know why they stopped. I guess because they couldn't stop people from bringing their phones in. But it kind of ruins the whole thing now when you see a band live and it's like at the shitty sound from an iPhone or from an Android that people kind of go, oh yeah, well that's okay with me though. But it's a shitty sound, and it's a shitty representation of of the band, live. But it is what it is these days. You can't stop.
I think it was rerun from What's Happening.
The Doobie Brothers. I love that episode.
Yeah, but wait, Don, that was just a bootleg though. That wasn't video.
Oh no, he had a tape recorder. That's right.
It was just audio. Yeah.
But it was big and bulky, and you had to hide it under your coat. But that was literally what people were trying to do back then. And Frank, you're right, man. It's just it kills the mystique of a band to a band's playing, and then 5 minutes after the concert's over, it's on YouTube.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Not a representation of being there.
Right.
It sucks.
Yeah, you can't reproduce that magic that happens when you're there.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many pictures and how many videos I can show of. We just did a show in Nottingham, and there's nothing that's going to let you understand and feel what happened at that show. It was such a great show. No matter how many videos you see, how many pictures you see, you really can't get the feeling of what was going on in those shows. And I love those kind of shows, but they're just not representative of what happens at those shows.
What else sucks about YouTube also is back in the day, like you'd be able to go out. Let's say you wanted to test a new song live, and Sinful was about to come out. You wanted to play some different songs from it, see which songs would go over with the crowd. Problem is now when a band wants to do that, it gets up on YouTube and the secret's out. So you can't play a new song unless you're ready for the world to hear it, and they're going to hear that shitty live version of it first before the real version comes out.
Yes, we did that. We did that on that last marathon tour. We had a couple of songs that were going to go on the next album, which we never did. And one was kind of like a rapping kind of tune that had a great drum beat, kind of like it was kind of like a big drum sound, kind of like Under Suspicion, but a little bit more upbeat. And we did it sparingly on that whole last tour just to work it out and to get it together a little bit more. You could never do that now. Never do that now. It's like it would be immediately on YouTube.
Yeah.
To take what Monte said before, like you would watch Foxes to see 10 seconds of Angel, and and then when obviously I know we're going to move on to the live album, so maybe this leads into it, but like of course Live Without a Net, one of my favorite live albums ever. Just looking at the pictures, like you're whatever was going on in your mind was way better than what anybody's to. There's, Greg Giuffria playing the keytar. Oh my God, that's like the coolest thing. All the pictures of the band playing live look so cool. That's a way better representation than seeing, somebody recording on their flip phone.
Right, exactly right.
Absolutely. That album, 1980, let's definitely get into that. And to me, it did seem like it was a little bit too late. If you put it out a few years earlier, when Kiss Alive and Frampton Comes Alive, of course, it was a double live album. I think that would have been something that could have broke Angel. But I think by 1980, it was just, a little too late. Well, what was your take on that? That was at Long Beach Arena, right, Frank? Or a lot? Yes.
Yes. It was Long Beach Arena and Santa Monica Civic. Both shows.
Was that the tour with Frank Marino and Humble Pie, the marathon?
No.
Okay,
that was after. That was that tour came after. But that was a tour that we were headlining.
Right. See, people forget that you were a big headliner, and Long Beach Arena. That was 14,000, 15,000 people. So that was for a band that didn't get much radio play at all. That was a huge deal.
Yeah, we used to do 2 nights at Kiel Auditorium. We had pockets where we were able to do big shows with our, and we had to have a big enough stage to do all the effects as well. So that tour just before we did the marathon tour was probably the biggest tour. We were able to use all the effects and stuff, which was always great to do. But most of that stuff was from Santa Monica Civic and Long Beach Arena.
Wow. Monty, what was your take on the live record?
I kind of agree with you, Bob, that it just felt like it came a little too late to make like a real big impact the way like Frampton Comes Alive or Kiss Alive did. But also maybe even a little bit too late just in my trajectory because, I had kind of gotten out of the band, started like to lose my love affair a little bit on Sinful at the time. And then by the time 1980 came along, I was starting to get into heavier stuff. I was like into Sabbath and Deep Purple and Heap, and like thrash was right around the bend. So I wasn't really like as into the band, so I don't remember spending a lot of time with that record. So that's what I could mean with it being late as well.
Right.
Just from my own trajectory. But I'd love to go back and listen to it because, we were saying before, hey, you go back and listen to Sinful because you're not tired of the songs and it's a fresh experience. So certainly I could use with spending some time with that record and reappraising it. And I'm sure if I put it on now, I would just completely love it. I mean, it's got so many great classics on it. I remember the production and the sound being really good on it as well. So yeah. I'm going to revisit that one. But I'm sure when I do, I'll think it was completely rock solid because I remember it being, like I said, well produced, well mixed, and being heavy as well. And having, there weren't a ton of Sinful songs on it either. It was just a good balance of the band's whole career. So I'm going to go dig that one out. And by the way, it was reissued like all the Angel records were on Rock Candy Records. And the guy that runs
Derek
Rock
Oliver.
Candy, Derek Oliver, is a good friend of all of ours. Yeah, so you could buy that. I guess it's available now on Rock Candy on Amazon as well.
Yeah, when I look back on that, it probably should have been switched. That should have probably been after White Hot and Sinful after the live album, which would have given us more time to sink our teeth into Sinful a little bit more as well. So that probably.
And it would have been a nice kind of closing chapter too after White Hot, kind of closing the door on 70s Angel, 70s Angel, and giving you guys a little bit of a breather to kind of freshen it up and make it even bigger in the 80s. But hindsight's always 20/20.
I was going to say, was the band having problems then? Because I know you broke up right after that live album, and I think that's another reason why that album really didn't get promoted. Or did you break up shortly after? Was it shortly after the live record? Or you were working on a forthcoming studio record, correct?
We were working on another studio album. It kind of fell apart when Neil sold
that's right.
Casablanca to Polygram, right around that area, that time period. Jack Douglas was supposed to do the next album. I talked to Jack about doing it, and he was on board. He had pushed an artist that he was doing, a Canadian artist that he was doing, back a little bit so he could do the album. But it was just constant fighting with Polygram to get the money to do it, to pay the appropriate points to Jack and what the record company and the band were going to pay to Jack, and it was just a lot of like you say, it's a classic artist album record company fuck up. You know what I mean? It's arguing back and forth and going between lawyers, and Neil was no longer there. So it was, we didn't have a guy that we could go to his office and sit down and talk to, because these guys were in Germany. They were overseas. So it was, it was a tough period, and it kind of just slowly fell apart.
I was going to say, it's too bad that you never got to do a record with Jack, because I believe isn't Jack the one you wanted for White Hot originally?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And look, I think Eddie Leonetti did an amazing job. I couldn't see White Hot being any better, but Jack has just got such a toughness about him, and it's it would have been a pretty hard rocking record, and his engineer, Jay Messina, those guys just got amazing sounding records. That would have been something I'd love to hear, a Jay Messina produced Angel record.
Yeah, they were, when I was with, I went back to New York with Eddie Kramer to mix the On Earth album and finish up some vocals. And when we were at the record plant, right next door to us was Jack and Jay. They were doing Derringer, and downstairs was Bob Ezrin doing Alice Cooper. So
those were the days.
And the crazy part is we used to go down and take a break and sit in the break room. And one night we went down there, and that's when John Lennon was in there, and that's when I met John Lennon. But those were crazy and great times back then. But that's when I first started talking to Jack. And years later, like I said, when that sixth album was supposed to happen, we didn't have a producer, and Jack was in town. And I had hung out with Jack a few times because I got close to Eddie, and Eddie Leonetti and Jack, they had that company together. So I had asked Jack if he would do the album, and he said yes. And unfortunately, it never happened.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's interesting. All this, always with creative and corporate, there's always problems. But just imagine if the whole trajectory of Angel just shifted a couple years forward, MTV would have been there for you.
Oh yeah, right.
And we wouldn't even be having any of these conversations. Like,
Yeah.
easily
Interesting analysis. Yeah.
would have went into the early 90s, if not beyond, because, I think something that we've kind of all come to a conclusion is there was really no way to pinpoint Angel in a certain way. So maybe even beyond the early 90s, maybe somebody could have brought a little bit of the rougher edge to make it through the grunge period. But certainly, if you had jumped on the MTV bandwagon, that would have easily given you another 10 years.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
it's such a shame. It's just the timing is like it broke up right at the time when I thought the buildup would just begin. And I totally agree with you guys. And I think having Jack Douglas, if you were to do a new record that would have come out in 81 and whatnot, it probably would have hopped right on the MTV, because everyone did have that respect for Angel, kind of like even more so than a Hanoi Rocks or whatever that, you always hear Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue. And Angel was the American band that was doing it long before any of these bands. So, there would have definitely been that respect factor, and it just was, timing, man. It just sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Timing has so much to do with a lot of different things,
Let's talk about what happened afterwards, and we'll kind of close this in because we're already at an hour and 40 minutes. But it was obviously a great conversation. We could go on for another 2 hours.
Wait, for 5 records, an hour and 40 minutes on 5 studio records. Damn. This is as long as the Blue Oyster Cult one, and that was 13
That's
albums.
true. Well, I know the band did kind of reform a couple times. You and Barry got the band together, and then, of course, recently you and Punky got together. Talk a little bit about what happened after the band originally broke up until now, Frank.
Well, when we kind of split apart, Barry and I stayed together. Barry and I have been playing together for a long time, since 1970, maybe 71, and on and off with different things, different bands and stuff. So we're always we're always in touch with each other. So we wanted to continue, and Punky didn't really want to go out anymore. Greg was doing his thing with House of Lords or Jeffrey or whatever it was at that time, and Felix had moved back to New York. So Barry and I wanted to continue, and we started writing together a lot more, trying to put something together. And that's when we came up with In the Beginning album, and obviously asked Punky to play on that, and Punky played on a couple of tracks. We went down to Virginia and actually brought Felix up as well. Felix came down to Virginia from New York to play on a couple of tracks on that. So we had the 4 of us together for a few of the tracks on that album. But that album was it was a difficult album. It was some stuff that Barry and I had from logged back before Angel broke up, and some new stuff that we had, and we just didn't know what to do with it. We didn't know if we should come out with it as Angel, and the only way we really could get back out on the road was calling it Angel, and the only way we could really get a deal was calling it Angel. So that's what we did. We had those guys play on it and stuff, and then we went out on the road and did some shows in Europe and on the East Coast as well. And from that point on, I stayed doing what I've always been doing, that's singing. So when I moved out here, I started looking for a place where I could sing out here and, meet with different people out here. And I started teaching. That's when I started teaching and making different contacts out here. Over the years, I developed some relationships with good relationships with people like Ken Ciancimino and Paul Crook, who eventually produced my solo album. And when I did my solo album, again, I always asked the guys to play on it. I asked Punky to play on it. I didn't ask Felix to play on that album because I had kept the bass player and the drummer together. I wanted it to feel like it wasn't disjointed, because I had a lot of different artists come in on different guitar players and stuff. So I didn't want it to sound kind of disjointed in different times and stuff. So when I laid the bed tracks down, I was concerned about that. So Paul and I asked the guys from Meatloaf's band which I had met through Paul, to do the bed track. So that's how we did that. And I asked a lot of different players to play on that. And of course, I asked Punky and I asked Greg, and Punky did play on that. And now when Punky did his solo album, he did the same thing, asked me to sing on one of his tracks. So both of us going out and doing solo projects and stuff. At one point, we got together and did a thing out here in Vegas when Punky played out here, and he asked me if I would come up and sing The Tower on the encore, and I said, of course. So just doing The Tower with Punky again out here made it a lot easier to say, let's do some shows together, you know. So when he got back, I guess his whole thing kind of fell apart, the band and all that stuff. So what he did was he gave me a call. He said, let's do some shows. What do you think about doing some shows together? So I said, absolutely, let's do it. So we put some shows together just to see how it would work out. And, the band sounded great. Billy Orico he's a big Barry Brandt fan. So he's got the essence of Barry. I mean, he doesn't play exactly like Barry, but he plays the stuff. It's kind of like Barry would approach it. You know what I mean? So I love playing with that guy. And the rest of the guys as well. Charlie, great keyboard player, and Steve is a great bass player. And between Punky, Danny, and myself, we've developed now a songwriting team that we all feel comfortable with. And I'm looking forward to doing the next album, whenever that is. So we've been writing, and I'm looking forward to doing the next one. This last one that we did was a learning process for us, because we're usually in the same room when we were writing, and this now not used to that. So we our approach had to be adjusted. So we made the adjustments, and we worked out a few tunes. I went to New York, and Punky went to New York, and we got the guys together and worked out a couple of tunes together, and then I went back early before I did my vocals to finish up my lyrics and the melodies and stuff that I had and what they had for ideas, and we put it all together and then to come out with the Risen album, and I think we all feel really great about it.
Got some Jersey energy on there, baby.
Absolutely, there's a lot of Jersey stuff going on there.
I love it.
And that's available on Frontiers Records, correct, Frank?
My stuff was Frontiers. Right. The Angel, the Risen album is on Cleopatra.
Oh, okay, that's right.
And those guys have been great with us. They allowed us to do exactly what we needed to do. They've never said no, we can't do that. They've always worked with us, which is the beginning of a great relationship. You know, when you have a record company like that who's willing to work with you, it's always great. And we've signed a new management deal with Ron Rainey. Ron is someone that Punky and I knew from the past, and we ran into him on the cruise that we did just before all this craziness happened. We did a cruise that was a lot of fun to do. We had never done a cruise before. We met up with Ron there, talked a little bit between each other, and after we came back, we kept in touch, and we've worked out like a working relationship now. We just signed some contracts and made it official that we are with Ron Rainey Management, and we look forward to everything in the future now. Once this craziness ends, to try and get back on track and getting this thing going again.
Right? Yeah, Brian and Tim from Cleopatra, great guys, of course. We did the Band vs. Brand movie through Cleopatra that features Frank in it, and as well as the Inside Metal movies that has Frank in it. Good plug there. Anything else, Don or Monty, you want to add before we close this off?
Well, I want to just add that I saw the band tour in support of this record at Iridium. And Frank, I think we probably met backstage briefly. I think I might have pictures, I'm not sure. But anyway, I thought you guys killed that night. You sounded just as, vocally, you pulled off all the shit you did in the 70s. Yeah, it was really amazing how true the band sounded to its old days, even with only 2 original members, you know. Yeah. But it was just such a nice coming full circle for me thing, from seeing the band from 79, probably till I think it was probably 2019 when I saw that.
Wow.
Anyway, what an amazing experience, and it was just really nice meeting you guys, and you were really cool that night, even though you had no idea who I was at that time. But you were just like, just happy to meet your fans,
absolutely. And coming off of shows, when you're coming off of shows like that, there's so much energy going on, and there's so many people back there and stuff. It's just there's a lot of stuff going on all at once. So I'm sorry if I didn't didn't know.
Oh no, you were great. You were great. And you guys looked in better shape than Stars too. Stars looked like hell. You guys still look cool.
That was an interesting show. When I first walked in there, I thought, it's interesting they're doing rock shows here because it's very tiny, it's very small, but it's very cool. It's got a great vibe to it, and I loved doing the show there. It was a lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely, great venue.
Yeah. I'll just end by saying, obviously Frank, always thanks for all the great music over the years, and it may be a cliche, but I'd listen to Frank sing the phone book, so it's great that Punky's come along for the ride. You got my Jersey boys holding down their end, and once in a while Felix comes around, which is great. Yes. I got to hang with Felix actually at the Iridium. David Elfson had an event there, and Frank was there, and he brought the bass that he used on Live Without a Net, and I got to hold that. And as a 50-plus-year-old man, that was super exciting for me. Just great to see all you guys still active and still doing it. And if you snub Monte a little bit, don't worry. He's just he's one of those corporate records.
Well, I do want to say thank you, Don, for bringing us up all the time during when you were doing the show there, because I think it sparked a few things here and there that brought us back together, and finally what happened was Punky and I playing together. So I want to thank you for always bringing us up on that metal show. So that was and it was always nice to hear someone out there talking about Angel. It's always nice to hear that.
Yeah, Scott Gorham said he really got reignited in keeping the Thin Lizzy name alive when someone introduced him to a younger person and said, yeah, Scott played in Thin Lizzy, and the kid was like, who? Boys are back in town.
Right.
Jailbreak? Nothing. And he was like, I can't let that legacy of music go. And that, I felt that same way about Angel. And I can also never thank you enough for sending me the Japanese version of the opening monologue of the show, which is brilliant. So amazing.
Thank you all, man. This has been a great cast, of course. Don Jamieson, definitely when things get back to normal, I'm sure you'll be out touring and stuff. I know, Don, you're very active on Twitter especially, right? Twitter, Facebook, people get in touch with you?
Yep, all the socials, and I do a webcast called That Jamieson Show on Compound Media. Yeah. So, Frank, when you're ready to plug the new album, I'll have you come on there. And in the meantime,
I would love that.
Yeah, no live coming soon.
I can't believe we just heard Don speak for 2 hours. There was no jokes. This is like a whole new side. Like not even you, dude. I don't even think you squeezed one joke in. You feeling okay?
You see, I'm rusty.
Hey, Don just proving he could be serious. Anyway, Bob, thank you for bringing everyone together as always. Frank, it's amazing to just be on the phone with you. Like you're such a childhood hero of mine, and I've always loved Angel, and it's just so thrilling to be able to talk to you, tell you what I think of the records, and just be part of this whole thing. So thank you very much.
Thank you guys for having me. I really enjoy it. It's my favorite subject to talk about, Angel. It's the one I know best. So it's always a lot of fun to talk about that stuff. So thank you for having me on, and thank you for having this conversation. It was a fun. It went by very quickly. It was a fun time.
Absolutely. And in closing, Frank, do you have a website people could get in touch with you? Or social media?
We have a new Angel Facebook. It's Angel Official, and we're putting together a website as well. That should be Angel Official as well. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening right now. We're just trying to, it's odd that now we have time to put it together. But I'm wishing that we didn't have time to put it together, but we do have the time to put it together correctly. So that's kind of been taking up a lot of the time that we need to. But yeah, it's Angel Official on both the website and the Facebook
All
page.
right. Well, gentlemen, thank you again. Another great podcast. We will definitely all speak again very soon.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Mad
All right.
Dog.
Thanks, guys.
Checked out that Angel Risen album. Check it out, man. It's a great album. It really
Absolutely.
is.
Oh, I bought it on release. I have it.
All right, guys. Thank you for
All right,
having
guys.
me.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. Subscribe and listen to all episodes by going to our pages on iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and more. You can listen to all other episodes and access up-to-date information and news on the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast by going to our website at www.shockwaveskullsessions.com. Email all comments, questions, and suggestions to shockwaveskullsessions@gmail.com.